Greetings, everyone. My name is Tony Holowitz, and I want to thank you for being here for this podcast. In this podcast, I want to tell you the story about a new client I have, and this client got me to thinking about some things that are related to ACT and the way you manage data in ACT. And I've worked with this issue through the years, and I just thought I'd bring it up in this discussion. So my client hired me because they're longtime ACT users and they have a lot of data in their database. And they hired me because they want me to help them clean it up. So as I met with them and I started talking to them, what became readily apparent to me is that they were really motivated to clean up the data. And the nice woman I'm working with, she and I had a conversation about this, and they had tons of contacts, really old contacts that had been around for a long time. And one of the things that I always look at when I'm working with people that are using ACT and have been using it is, how have they been using it in the past? What story will their ACT database tell me? For example, what is their approach to ACT? Do they call the people in the database? Do they email the people? What do? Do they mail them stuff? How do they interact with all the people in the database? Can they determine who these contacts are? For example, if I ask them, hey, could you show me all your clients? Could you pull up a quick list? If I said, show me all your prospects, could you pull me up a quick list? So what generally happens when I start in this discussion with them is the data starts speaking to me. I look at it a little bit differently than they do typically at the beginning. And what I try to do is point out different ways to look at the data that they might not have thought about. For example, I've always been a fan of the ID status field, because the ID status field is the way you can tell who a contact is. And ACT, do you remember the old days when we used to collect business cards and we'd hang on to them? And a lot of times those business cards would end up in a shoebox or some kind of box where we'd come back to them or figure out how do we deal with them. Well, ACT, if you have a lot of contacts in there that are not organized, it's like that shoebox. You have no idea who's in there. So when you're working with data, I think there's a point in time where you have to get a little more intimate with that data and really look at it. So what I'll try to do is say, okay, let's look at the ID status. Can you identify who these people are? And a lot of times they can't. If they don't use the ID status religiously and keep it simple, a lot of times it's hard to find the information they're looking for. So how do we break it down? Well, typically what I'll do is this. I work on the assumption that every contact in that database is a customer waiting to happen. Now, if you've had a contact in that database and, for example, they have an email address and you haven't emailed them for years, well, the reality is maybe they're no longer at that email address, but the only way you're going to find that out is to send them an email. So when cleaning up the database, one of the things I never do is I never will remove a contact that has an email address. ACT has a built-in tool called ACT Marketing Automation, and subscribers have the ability to create a quick email and send it out. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. It doesn't have to have a ton of artwork. It can be a simple text email, couple, 3 lines, saying something as simple as, hey, just a reminder, this is what we do. Can we help you with anything? When you send that email out, what it's going to do is first, it's going to maybe get to the contact and maybe create a quote or generate some business or a discussion. But frankly, if you have old data, most likely what's going to also happen is a lot of those emails are going to bounce, meaning the people are no longer there. The beauty of ACT Marketing Automation is once that email has gone out, we can isolate all the contacts whose email bounced. I can also show you all the contacts who opened that email. I can also show you contacts that have unsubscribed, clicked on links, things of that nature. But sending out that initial email could go out to a contact, and the potential exists that that contact you never expected to buy anything from you, that initially you might have thought, no, I'm just going to delete this contact because they've been in there forever. What if that contact buys from you? Now that opens a can of worms, because if all of a sudden a contact that you least expected to buy from you buys from you, now you say, wait, I should not be deleting contacts easily or quickly. I should think this through. So sending out an email is a great way to gather more information. It starts to tell you the story about the quality of your data. It tells you who's there, who's not. all the emails that bounce, I generally will isolate them and live to fight another day. In other words, let's set them aside for a minute and talk about them later. Now we have all these people whose email bounced. They might be prospects, they might be clients, but if they have an email that went through and they opened it, in my mind, they're a prospect, and I would mark them in the ID status as such. Now, for all the people that bounced, again, I'd come back to them and work on them separately, but I'd set them aside. Don't get too worried about it. My experience has been a lot of times when people take on these projects, they're like, yeah, I want it done yesterday. I want to get this done. And they're so anxious to get it done. But this is the thing. Give it a little bit of time. Don't be too anxious about it. Give it time, whether it takes a week, a month, a quarter, half a year. Start working the contacts, because now you are letting your data get stronger, because you're all of a sudden able to look at this information in a different light. So when you're cleaning your data, be patient. When you're cleaning your data, start the process of getting intimate with your contacts. Now, in this case, for this client, I know they're going to have a ton of contacts that they have to look at. They have to get intimate with. And sometimes if it's in the thousands of contacts, that can be overwhelming. But in their case, they have sales staff. So think of it this way. Let's say, just for example, we had 4,000 leads or contacts that we really had to take a look at one at a time. Well, I can show you ways to do that in a way that's systematic in its approach. For example, first of all, we might break it out so that each salesperson has to deal with 1,000 of the contacts. So now we had 4,000 contacts. Now we've broken it down to 1,000 per salesperson. So that number just got smaller. Next, I always tell people when they're starting to go through the data, take a piece of paper, write the alphabet A to Z, and simply do a lookup of all the contacts that you're assigned that begin with the letter A. Work through those. Cross that off your list. Go to B next and C. And all of a sudden, these little steps of just getting it done, A through Z, make it easier. And this allows you to systematically go through all these contacts, look at them, review them. And even if it takes you, like I said, 6 months, who cares? The thing that I never want to have happen, I fear that a contact that could be incredibly valuable to you is in there waiting to buy something. You just haven't asked them. Unfortunately, we don't know who that contact is, but be patient. Assume there might be a contact like that, and assume that by working through this, going through the sales process, getting a little more intimate with the contacts, we might come across that particular contact, and they might buy something. If we had gotten into this and really worried about getting things out of there too early or too quickly, we might have deleted that contact and they would have never done business with us. So let this process play out. Let this process work its way through. Some of the other things you can do is you can find things that are and things that are not inside of Act. So for example, we might want to find all the people that have an email address. We want to find all the people that don't have an email address. We might want to find all the contacts that don't have an email address, a contact, a company name, or even a phone number. Now, if these contacts are there, we can isolate them, and then we might say to ourselves, well, that's a lot of work. Maybe these aren't really valuable because there's not a lot of good information here to even work with. So maybe these are some contacts we want to delete. But to take it a step further, Act has a field in it called create date. So when you create a contact, it tells you the date that contact was created. So if we have all these contacts with poor information in it, we can make a decision on, hey, you know what? If they were created before, let's say, 5 years ago, yeah, let's maybe delete those. So what I usually recommend is instead of deleting them, I will take and put the word delete in the ID status for all those contacts. And the reason I do that is because at the end of the day, I never delete anything without creating some kind of backup. You can create a backup of your Act database. You can create a copy of your Act database, or we can just shoot those things out to a file like Excel for another day. So in other words, I don't want all your hard work from the past to just go away. I want to set it aside just in case someday you get that young new salesperson that comes into your company. They're very hungry and you're looking for contacts to assign them. Maybe those are the best contacts you can give them initially. Maybe they're not even worth looking at again. But at the end of the day, take a little time with your data, let it tell you a story, work through it in a systematic approach. Through some of the tools in Act, I can show you how to set them up in groups so you can work on them as time permits, and that group will whittle down the contacts one by one as you go through them. The new version of Act Premium Cloud, actually has tools where you can literally select information in a contact and do a quick Google search of that information. So I always tell people, if the name is John Smith, chances are you're not going to find a lot of information because there's so many John Smiths. But if you have a unique name like Tony Holowitz, there's not a lot of us. If you Google my name, even if you don't have other information, you might find out I've gone to another company. You might find me on LinkedIn. You might find me on a website. It just takes a few seconds to do this before you finally delete that contact. So let Act do its job. Let Act work for you, and don't overthink this, and be patient. And then I think you'll have a great experience when cleaning up your data. And you know what? You might just generate some sales you weren't expecting during this process. And to me, that's the best thing that can happen. Okay, everyone, I just want to give you some insights into what I'm thinking about with this new client, and I thought I'd share this story because I think it's hopefully going to be beneficial to them and also potentially to you if you have a lot of Act data. Hey, everyone, you have a great day. Thank you for your time. Bye now.